When we think of a stereotypical Eurovision entry, our minds probably don't jump to a slow ballad. But the two that actually won the contest in the last decade either broke the points record or became arguably the most commercially successful Eurovision entry of the century so far. That last one was Arcade by Duncan Lawrence in 2019, and I wish you would all stop saying that I look like him. But while I probably can't convince you to do that, I am going to try and convince you that 2025 could be the year where once again we see a ballad win the contest. In addition to that, there's not one but two songs, in my opinion, that could do it. I've had a lot of people in the comments asking me to talk about these, so today we're going to do just that and see how high the chances are of one of them actually winning. Before we start, as always, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy it. And you can find mine and my editor Jay's socials in the description if you'd like to follow us. You can also find details there on how to support the channel financially. With that out of the way, it's time to get straight into the first one of these two contenders, and that's Austria's entry for this year. That's JJ with his song, Wasted Love. Austria has had its ups and downs in the contest, but to be honest, in the last 10 years or so, it's had more downs than ups. While there was the high point of 2014, when Conchita Wurst won the whole show, that was one of only 3 top 10 finishes in the last 25 years. Recently, there haven't been that many entries that looked like repeating that feat. Cesar Sampson did manage that in 2018, but that was followed up by 3 non-qualifications, and while there has been an improvement since then, the low finishes of Taya and Selena and of Colleen were, to be honest, a little underwhelming given how much hype there was around those entries before the show. That was especially clear in the case of Taya and Selena, but it's hardly their fault that they ended up with a staging that didn't suit their song at all. Luckily for Taya, she actually has a chance to put it right now because she is one of JJ's songwriters on this song. Wasted Love is, well, a ballad, otherwise it wouldn't be in this video, but it's certainly not conventional. That's because it has operatic vocals throughout, and it has a few more surprises up its sleeve than you'd usually get from a song in this genre. Those vocals, though, are the immediate and obvious highlight. That is no surprise given that JJ is a countertenor and he was trained at the Vienna State Opera. This is generally accepted to be one of the most prestigious opera houses in the world. In addition to that, opera is something that is very traditionally associated with Austria, so if there's anyone who knows how to do it, it's the Austrians. In a Eurovision context, these vocals can be really divisive, but when they're used in the right way, they create something really special too. One of the cleverest ways that that's done in this song is by creating almost 2 separate registers, one for the verse and one for the chorus. The verses are melancholic and reflective, sung in a slightly lower register and seem to be someone reflecting on a lost love. The choruses are much higher. In fact, the lowest note in the chorus is the same as the highest note in the verses. These choruses feel much more haunting and laden with grief. This creates 2 contrasting but connected emotions sitting side by side. This cleverly reflects the way that human beings interact with grief. It's like you swing from a more rational, reflective view to an irrational grief and pain. And in my opinion, this song reflects that really well. In addition to that, this song does have an ace up its sleeve, and it's probably going to be as divisive with the general public as it is with most Eurofans. Following 2 minutes of slow ballad, we get a 30-second outro with a dance beat and chopped vocals. I'm sure it wasn't JJ or the songwriter's intention here, but it kind of reminds me of Brain Power. In all seriousness, this can only go one of 2 ways live. Either it will provide an opportunity to elevate the song to another level, and alongside the right staging, create a potential winner, or it'll come off wrong and just feel really naff. Whichever of those endings we get, I love how risky this is. And if you never throw a Hail Mary like this, then you're going to miss 90% of the opportunities that you have to go and win the contest. It'll also be interesting to see whether the stage show incorporates some of the ideas that the music video introduces. In particular, the end of the video shows him suspended in midair on the stage of a theatre, floating above his dancers before they eventually pull him down. This is a difficult effect to recreate on the Eurovision stage, and that's because there are some pretty tight rules around suspending objects and people from the ceiling at the contest. But I would love to see if they're able to replicate it in some way. They've certainly got the budget and the personnel in place to maximize the chance of this getting a really high finish too. They have one of the most exciting stage directors of recent times in the form of Sergio Hyen. He was was responsible for the masterpiece that was Bambi Thug staging last year. Personally, while it is naturally divisive, I think this whole concept is really stunning and it works so well. In addition, it's easy to see where the path to victory lies. This is going to tread in a similar fashion to Nemo and Loreen who have come before. What this needs to do is maximize its margin in the jury vote and pick up enough public votes to carry it over the line. That's also true for the other song I'm going to talk about in this video, so I'm going to go over that in a minute in more detail. What is unique to this song though is the hurdles it's going to have to clear in order to get to be in that position. The first and most obvious is the delivery of the live vocal. This entire song was designed from the ground up to be a foil for JJ's voice and to allow it to shine. That's a completely sensible decision to make when you have such a unique and unusual voice as a countertenor. That said, it has to be absolutely perfect on the night, and the jury points will rapidly fall away if this isn't achieved. Given the fact that his training is as world-class as it gets, I'd be very surprised if this happened, to be honest. But even if he does deliver, opera is still not a guarantee of success at the contest. Some people have compared this to The Code, but this isn't really like that. Nemo utilizes an operatic voice in that song, but it's only a small feature in the bridge, whereas for this, it's much more integral. In addition, it's a totally different mood, and the instrumental setting couldn't be more different either. There are better comparisons elsewhere though, so we're going to look to those instead. You have a spectrum of outcomes when it comes to opera in Eurovision, ranging from incredibly good to incredibly bad. On one hand, you have Grand Amore, which demolished the public vote in 2015, or Elena Nechayeva from 2018, who scored 245 points and 6th place, with a similar score from the juries and the public. On the other end, you have Amore Vasily with the most traditional offering of opera that we've had in the contest in recent years, ending up coming 15th, having crashed from a pre-show favourite status. Go even further and you have whatever this is from Bulgaria in 2009. The funny thing is, and I can't believe I'm admitting this, I actually kind of like the studio version of that song, but live it was a total disaster. In all seriousness though, especially as we saw with Grand Amore, the public does and can really get on board with popera in the right circumstances. If they do, it would be very hard to see how this doesn't come top 5 at least, if not wins the whole contest. That said, with a flawless live performance, it could be that the jury take JJ there themselves. Because of the unpredictability of how well popera does in Eurovision, there's going to be a certain amount of unknowns with this right up until we start seeing rehearsal footage and until we see it live in the semi-finals. But outside of the studio version, where the vocals are maybe a little too processed, in a more natural setting on stage, I think that JJ is going to really shine. And I think there's a big chance that the public could connect with this as well as the jury. There is another ballad that is in contention for the victory at Eurovision this year, and that is from France. They've chosen Luan, and she will be singing her song, Maman. France has found a very reliable formula in the years since the pandemic. With the exception of Fulen in 2022, which was robbed by the way, they have gone to this formula every single year. That is, be as French as humanly possible. This applies to Barbara Pravi, it applied to Lazara, it applied to Slimane, and it will apply to Luan as well. In 2/3 of those cases, it also paid off with an incredible result. For that reason, we're treading a well-trodden but reliable path at Eurovision here for the French. And this year, it might finally be the time where it doesn't just deliver a top 5 result, as it has 2 of the last 4 years, but an outright victory. This is a powerful French chanson sung by Luan to her mother. It's a reflection on how she processed the grief of her passing and how that grief has evolved now that she has a daughter of her own. While both this and Austria deal with loss of different types, this one a much more visceral and deep loss in the form of Luan's mother, weirdly, despite the darker subject matter, this one offers more light at the end of the tunnel. That's because, as much as it's a song about grief, it's also a song about the cycle of life and about hope. It talks about how Luan stopped counting the years, and it closes with her own child's voice. For that reason, it's as much a reflection on the passing of generations and on the changes in roles that we have as we go through life, as it is about loss in its purest form. Unlike last year where Slimane was first out of the gate with his song, this year the French were the last to release it. And this generated a lot of hype. This was probably the most anticipated release of the season, and it came days after all of the rest of the songs were known. When that release finally came, it was through the medium of a full halftime show, marching band and all, at a Six Nations rugby match in front of 80,000 people at the Stade de France. That is going about as big as you can get, and I love the ambition of this. I think any broadcaster would have said yes to this opportunity if it was presented to them. That said, in terms of the contest, it actually leaves us with less information than I would hope to have at this point about how this is going to do, as well as what we're actually going to see from Luan's performance in Basel. That's because I really don't think that this song was ever intended to fill a stadium of 80,000 people at a sports event. In this case, Luan was alone, elevated on a high platform, with a huge amount of empty space around her. In my opinion, if anything, it requires the opposite approach at Eurovision. Luckily, as we've seen with Barbara Pravi and Slimane in particular, the French really know how to stage an emotional ballad like this. So I have full confidence that we're going to see something very different at the contest. That's why she's here in this video. Those two acts brought such a huge level of intimacy and personal connection to their performance, and as a result, it elevated their songs so much. You could basically apply the same concept to Luan here and probably get a similar result. This is someone who has a decade in the music industry, 2 diamond and 2 platinum selling albums, as well as a César Award for Most Promising Actress. This means she's a pretty much ideal fit for the contest. And to be honest, I think she has every chance to exceed the standards set by her predecessors and win the whole thing. Just like with Austria, I do think there are some things that need to happen to turn this from a contender into a winner, and I'm going to try and outline what I think those are. While Luan does need to be the focus, and I wouldn't be opposed to her being alone on stage, there really needs to be some visual storytelling with this performance as well. Because while most people will probably understand the title of the song, the level of connection required here to deliver a win is going to be so much more than that. This is an interesting challenge because you can't just fix it by making the staging really busy. In fact, that would probably have the opposite effect. Instead, we need something which is subtle and minimalistic, but nonetheless helps visually tell the story that Luan is singing. Given that context, I think the choice of staging director here is really interesting in the form of Fredrik Rydman. He's the same person who gave us Heroes and Cha 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 and Popular, and also, Maps by Leslie Roy. These stagings are busy and they're energetic and they're full of life. They still focus on the performer, but there is a lot going on. And in the case of Leslie Roy, probably a little too much for the singer to be able to execute. Rydman was also responsible for the code, which is a little more minimalistic, but not much. France, if you're watching this, please do not put Luan on a giant spinning top. In all seriousness, while Fredrik does have a record of success at the contest, this is a pretty unique challenge, and I'm interested to see how he'll respond to it. I'd love to see the use of shadows or some other kind of minimalist effect to try and depict this story and to demonstrate the journey that this song is taking us on from a grieving daughter to a doting mother. I may be putting France and Austria in a video together here, but hopefully what I'm trying to demonstrate is that despite the fact these are both ballads, they have very different challenges to overcome in order to win the contest. While Austria have to sell a vocal style, France is not necessarily dealing with the same problem. They need to sell a story, and they're doing that through a medium of an already proven and reliable genre. I love both of these songs, and I'd be happy to see either of them win, but I'm really fascinated to see how they're going to overcome these challenges. If either of these come together in the way that I'm describing, they are absolutely in the conversation to win, but the only route to victory is by either winning the jury votes or coming so close to the other one of the songs in this video that they can beat them just by edging them out in the televote. In my opinion, we are talking a massive score for either of them in the juries, probably 300 points or more, in order to make sure they have sufficient cushion over more televote-friendly songs like Sweden to get themselves over the line. This is where things get interesting, because I actually made a prediction in an earlier video that we wouldn't have a third straight jury-led winner. While the headline predictions of that video, that Måns Zelmerlöw wouldn't be back in Eurovision and that Steffen Raab wouldn't be able to make Germany win the contest again, are either already proven to be correct or almost certainly going to be proven correct, this is one that I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up getting wrong. This is because we have two massive distortions in the televote in the form of Israel and Ukraine for very different reasons. In the case of Ukraine, it's an extremely motivated diaspora vote. To be clear, Ukraine's entry last year was one of the most beautiful songs I've seen in Eurovision in recent years, and it would have made a worthy winner of the contest. I do not mean to denigrate it in any way here when I say that there clearly was a strong motivation amongst Ukrainians forcibly completely displaced by Russia's invasion to vote for this song. As for Israel, I absolutely do mean to denigrate Hurricane, because the only reason it was near the top of the scoreboard was because of politics and politics alone. These factors are going to vary from year to year, but last year, these two countries alone ate up 630 points of the televote. Both of those were something of a high watermark and will probably reduce this year. But counterintuitively, these two televote giants mean it's more likely that we're going to see a jury-led winner. That's because all of the rest of the songs in the competition are playing for less points. This is additionally true this year because neither the Israeli nor the Ukrainian song look likely to be in with a chance of victory. We shouldn't forget that Croatia did beat both of those countries to the televote victory last year, and if a more televote-friendly song like Sweden can stay in touch on the jury side and then storm the televotes, they could win the show as well. But this path is clearly open to France and Austria, and if they make the right decisions, either one of them could take it. With that, that is all for this week, and I'm looking forward to covering a few more of the internally selected songs over the coming weeks. As we draw closer to the contest as well, we're going to be looking a bit more at what might happen next month. As always, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a thing. But for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in 7 days' time.